We're monitoring news out of the state of Georgia as the state could be set to charge Donald Trump with a variety of charges, including racketeering, conspiracy, false statements. We'll be following that. Joining us live with the latest details is senior correspondent John Honey. John?
Yeah, well, Michael and Katrina, Fulton County prosecutors are presenting a grand jury with findings from the 2.5-year investigation into former President Trump's alleged efforts to interfere with the results of the 2020 election. And we're also hearing, as you were just touching on, Michael, this hour, that prosecutors may be charging him with, among other alleged crimes, with racketeering in violation of the RICO Act. That's the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. And you generally hear about RICO charges in connection with organized crime in the United States, such as the mafia or drug gangs, that kind of thing. But again, these are just reports. This is not confirmed with the Fulton DA's office as of yet. Now, the grand jury is also hearing testimony from several witnesses as part of this investigation and possible indictment. This would be the 4th indictment against former President Trump. The other 3, as you know, are federal. And a big part of this case stems from the recorded conversation back on January 2nd, 2021, between Mr. Trump and Georgia's Secretary of State then, Brad Raffensperger, during which Trump asked Raffensperger to find the 11,700 votes needed for Trump to win Georgia. CNN is also reporting that Fulton County prosecutors may be in possession of text messages and emails connecting members of Trump's legal team to the early January 2021 voting system breach in Coffee County, Georgia, which is in the southeastern part of the state. Now, we're awaiting a response from Trump's legal team about this and also these potential charges. Meantime, former President Trump took to his Truth social media platform, as he often does, to post this message earlier today. I am reading reports that failed former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, will be testifying before the Fulton County grand jury. He shouldn't. Trump goes on to describe the investigation as a quote-unquote witch hunt, a description we've often heard from the former president in regards to this case and the others against him. He also once again contends he did nothing wrong and describes the cases as quote-unquote election interference in several other Truth posts earlier today as well. Now, security remains high outside the Fulton County Courthouse, where barricades have been erected. There have been road closures in that area in anticipation of this unprecedented and historic potential fourth indictment against the former president, who, unlike the other 3 federal cases, may be ordered to have his mugshot taken in Fulton County. That, according to the sheriff there. Also, in one final point, Michael and Katrina, unlike the federal courts or even the court in Manhattan, Georgia law allows cameras in the courtroom with a judge's approval. Katrina?
All right, John Huddy, thanks so much. And joining us now to discuss is President Trump's impeachment lawyer, David Schoen, and criminal defense attorney, Randy Zelin. Great to have you both with us this Monday afternoon. David, I'm going to start with you here. Again, as John pointed out, this would be the president's 4th indictment. Of course, the first 2 not federal. The 3rd was, and this would be another state indictment. Many people are conjecturing, are wondering why, asking the question why there would be a state indictment in Florida, considering that the charges may be very similar to his federal indictment that recently came out. Why would they seek a state indictment in Georgia?
Yeah, some would suggest, cynically, I suppose, that the fact that District Attorney Willis is up for re-election now plays into the equation. This has been talked about for quite a while. They hold out this phone call for which only snippets are played generally in public. They hold that out as sort of, a smoking gun in the case. But I think that the district attorney perceives that her constituency in Fulton County would support such an initiative in the election going forward. And but you're right. You raise a legitimate question about the overlap, at least on the underlying facts, with the federal prosecution in the District of Columbia.
And just a quick follow-up on that before we get to you, Randy. David, there's also been some conjecture that a state charge in Georgia would prevent Donald Trump from pardoning himself if he would be elected. Is that valid?
Yes, that's certainly true. And Georgia has an unusual pardon system, actually. They have a law in place that requires a significant part of the sentence to be served before it can be considered. Then it goes before a pardon board. One other thing I would say, though, by the way, in terms of trying the case, I would imagine that Mr. Trump would seek to move the case to federal court for the trial.
Yeah, well, we'll see, though, if that would actually happen, though. I think the cards are stacked against him to some extent on that. But, Randy, let me go to you now. I think that the American people have had a little bit, maybe even too much of this, because no matter how you cut it, he's still a former president. Even if you think that he did something wrong, at this point, isn't it just a bit too much? Doesn't it, even if it's just an appearance of impropriety, doesn't it look like justice in this country has been taken over by politics? And he is, at the end of the day, the leading candidate in the Republican Party to run for president in 2024.
I think in this particular instance, and we talk about being in unprecedented waters, and that is true. We may become immune to it. We may be used to it because we could be looking at now the former president looking at a fourth indictment. The first one was unprecedented. Now 4, it's kind of like ordering lunch already, and people are yawning. You make a great and raise a great question to which I don't think there's an answer to, because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you turn a blind eye to a former president breaking the law, then what is the message that you're sending to the rest of the citizenry? Oh, well, just because you hold high political office, that gives you a license to do whatever you want. Perhaps there should be a law in the books. Perhaps there should be a constitutional amendment where if you are a president or a former president, you have immunity, almost like as if you were a diplomat. Because short of that, you either prosecute someone who's a former president or even maybe an actual president. But if you do that, it's political. If you don't do it, it's political. So maybe Trump and Biden should just both agree to walk away from the political stage, walk away from high office, and we get fresh blood in. I think short of that, no matter what you do, if you pursue the charges, it's political. If you don't pursue the charges, it's political. And I think that's why we're supposed to have a grand jury system, because you're supposed to have a bunch of ordinary citizens determining whether or not it was more likely than not that this defendant committed a crime. And I really do think at some point the politics have to be out of it. And objectively, was a crime committed? Yes or no?
Yeah. David, you worked closely with the president before as his attorney. Anticipating this fourth indictment, how would you be handling your client, specifically the former president, if you were working with him at this point?
I think when you have to wait and see what the charges are, and then you go over the indictment carefully. He's notwithstanding what I read in the media, he's a terrific client to have. He's staying focused on the charges. He's creative in helping address them. He knows how to appeal to people. He knows how to appeal to a jury, et cetera. And so I think it should be approached methodically, and it would be. Anyway, but I do think, by the way, I know we may now disagree, but I think there will be a significant initiative to move it to federal court. It's a completely different dynamic than in the New York case.
And explain why you think that's so.
Well, because in this case, in the New York case, there's a question whether he was actually acting under color of law or in his capacity as the president in his dealings with Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels. In this case, I don't think there's really any legitimate question as to what capacity he was acting in. This had directly to do with the election. And I think that he would take a position under Article 2, Section 1 and Section 3 of the Constitution that he had an obligation to take steps with respect to the election. And by the way, with respect to the immunity question, there is actually immunity for a president acting within scope of his office. Nixon versus Fitzgerald decided the case. And there's a question here whether he was acting within what they call the outer perimeters of the
if we have time, to David's point,
we're almost out of time. We have a quick live event, but Randy, just put a bow on it for us.
Very quickly, the problem for the president in removing the Georgia case into federal court, he's going to end up in D.C., and that's probably the last place he wants to end up in
from the jury standpoint. All right. David Schoen, Randy Zelin, always appreciate your insight. Thanks so much for joining us.